The rain was coming down so hard it blurred the world into streaks of silver and black, hammering my windshield like an endless drum roll. It was late September, a Friday night, and I'd just finished a long shift at a warehouse outside Harrisburg. The drive home to my small apartment was normally about an hour, but with the storm it had already stretched to nearly 2. My wipers were on the highest setting, still barely keeping up, and every oncoming car blinded me with its glare for a split second before vanishing into the dark. I wasn't supposed to be on that road. The main highway was closed because of a crash and flooding, and my GPS had rerouted me down a twisting 2-lane back road through farmland and forest. Out there, no streetlights lit the way. It was just my headlights pushing against an ocean of rain, and the narrow ribbon of asphalt disappearing beneath my tires. My phone, mounted on the dash, flickered as it struggled to keep a signal. I had maybe 10% battery left. All I wanted was to get home, eat something warm, and crawl into bed. I slowed down as I came to a sharp bend in the road. The trees pressed in close here, their branches heavy with water, dripping and swaying in the wind. For a second, I thought I saw someone standing under one of the trees. A man, tall, motionless, soaked to the skin. My stomach clenched, but when my headlights swept over the spot, the figure was gone. I told myself it was a trick of the rain, a shadow from a branch. I turned the music up a little, anything to break the silence that filled the car between the hiss of the tires and the hammering rain. That's when I noticed the car behind me. At first, it was just faint headlights in the rearview mirror, flickering through the sheets of rain. Then it got closer, much closer. It wasn't tailgating exactly, but it matched my speed perfectly. When I slowed, it slowed. When I sped up, it sped up. My heart started to race. Out here, in the middle of nowhere, with no cell service and no houses in sight, another car following too closely wasn't just annoying, it was terrifying. I tried to tell myself it was just coincidence. Maybe they lived in the same direction. Maybe they were nervous about the rain and staying behind me for safety. But something about it felt wrong. The lights never wavered, never backed off, never tried to pass. It was like they were fixed to me. I gripped the wheel tighter, every nerve in my body screaming to find a gas station, a store, anything. The next few miles were a blur. My heart thudded in my ears. The rain grew heavier still, bouncing off the road like bullets. The car behind me stayed locked in place, its headlights 2 white holes burning into my mirror. I reached for my phone to dial 911, but the screen was black. Dead battery. I swore under my breath. My charger was still in my work locker. Then something else happened, something I can still hear in my head to this day. The radio, which had been playing low, cut to static. A high-pitched squeal filled the car, and then a voice, soft, urgent, genderless, slid through the static. "Keep driving. Don't stop." I froze. The voice wasn't part of any broadcast. It wasn't a song lyric or a DJ's chatter. It was direct, clear, like someone was sitting in the back seat whispering in my ear, "Keep driving. Don't stop." I snapped the radio off, but the voice didn't stop. It was still there, softer now, but insistent, like it was coming from the rain itself, seeping through the seams of the car. My heart pounded so hard I thought I'd pass out. I pressed the accelerator, but my car didn't respond the way it should. It felt heavier, like something was dragging behind me. I came around another bend, and that's when I saw them. People lining the road, dozens of them, standing perfectly still in the downpour. Men, women, maybe even children. It was hard to tell through the rain. They didn't move, didn't shiver, didn't hold umbrellas. Just rows of soaked, silent figures on both sides of the asphalt staring at me as I passed. Their faces were pale, indistinct in the storm, but their eyes followed me. I felt them even through the blur. The car behind me didn't slow. It weaved between the figures without hesitation, like it knew exactly where they were. Its headlights flickered once, like a signal. I pressed harder on the gas, my Corolla's engine whining, but it was like driving through molasses. The figures never stepped into the road, never touched the car. They just stared, endless rows fading into the storm. The voice in the static grew louder. "Don't stop! Don't stop! Don't stop!" I started to cry. I'm not ashamed of it. Tears mixed with sweat on my face as I gripped the wheel and drove, praying to see a town, a sign, a light, anything. My hands were numb, my knuckles white. The rain drummed harder and harder, a deafening roar on the roof. Then, out of nowhere, I saw a green sign through the blur. Pine Hollow, 2 miles. A town. Civilization. I nearly sobbed with relief. I pressed the pedal to the floor. The figures on the sides of the road thinned and then vanished. The car behind me kept its distance but didn't leave. I hit the town limits like breaking the surface after being underwater too long. Streetlights appeared, warm yellow glow reflecting off the wet pavement. Houses. A diner. A gas station. I swerved into the first parking lot I saw, a brightly lit 24-hour convenience store. My car shuddered to a stop. I slammed it into park and looked in the mirror. Nothing. No headlights, no car. The street behind me was empty. I sat there, shaking, rain dripping from my hair onto my work shirt. The radio was silent. My phone, dead, sat on the passenger seat. The voice was gone. Just the normal sound of rain on the roof. I forced myself to breathe, grabbed my wallet, and stumbled into the store. Inside, it was warm and bright, smelling like coffee and microwave burritos. A young cashier looked up from his phone and did a double take when he saw me. "You okay, man? You look like you've seen a ghost." I tried to answer, but my throat was dry. I bought a bottled water, sipped it, and sat at one of the little tables in the corner. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. Through the window, the rain fell steadily, but it looked normal again. No figures, no headlights. Just a stormy night in a small town. I stayed there for nearly an hour trying to calm down before I got back into my car. This time the drive was uneventful. No car behind me, no figures, no voice. Just wet roads and my own ragged breathing. When I got home, I locked every door and window, sat on my couch, and didn't move until the sun came up. For weeks after, I tried to tell myself I'd imagined it. Exhaustion, stress, the storm, some trick of light and shadow. But deep down, I knew what I saw. The figures in the rain, the car that mirrored my every move, the voice telling me not to stop. And I never did stop. If I had, I don't think I'd be here to tell this story. Even now, years later, every time I drive at night and the rain starts to fall hard, I feel my pulse quicken. I check the mirror more often. I keep my phone fully charged, and when headlights appear behind me, following a little too closely, matching my speed a little too perfectly, I remember that voice and grip the wheel tighter. Keep driving, don't stop. I don't know what would have happened if I had stopped, and I don't ever want to find out. Story the end. It was the kind of rain that feels alive, dense, cold, and unrelenting. It slicked the sidewalks into mirrors and made the air smell like wet concrete and ozone. I'd been on the road for hours that night, driving back from a friend's house in a small town outside of Indianapolis. My GPS had rerouted me because of flooding on the main highway, and before I knew it, I was on a 2-lane back road I didn't recognize, surrounded by dense woods on both sides. The only light came from my high beams slicing through the rain, and even that felt weak against the darkness pressing in. The wipers thumped back and forth, struggling to clear the windshield. My nerves were already frayed from the storm, but the isolation made it worse. I hadn't seen another car in at least 20 minutes, and cell service was spotty at best. All I wanted was to get back to the interstate and into some kind of normal traffic again. That's when I saw it, a shape in the road ahead. At first, I thought it was a deer, common enough in the area, but as I got closer, I realized it was a person. A man, maybe, standing right in the middle of the lane, soaked to the bone, unmoving despite the rain pouring down on him. I slowed the car, hesitating. His clothes were dark and clung to him, and he didn't seem to have an umbrella or any sort of protection from the weather. Just standing there. As I drew closer, I noticed his head was bowed, that chin tucked against his chest, and his hands hung limply at his sides. Instinct told me not to stop. Every horror movie cliché screamed in my head. I rolled the window down just a crack and called out, "Are you okay? Do you need help?" My voice sounded thin and weak against the storm. The man didn't answer. He just slowly raised his head. I couldn't see his eyes clearly through the rain, but there was something off about the way he moved. Jerky, like a puppet. Then he started walking toward my car. Not running, not waving for help. Just walking. My stomach flipped. I hit the gas and swerved around him, my tires spraying water as they caught traction. I glanced in the rearview mirror as I sped off, and for a split second, I could have sworn he was closer to the car than he should have been, like the distance between us had disappeared in a blink. I drove faster than I should have. the back road twisting and turning like it was trying to keep me there. Every time I thought I was putting distance between myself and that man, the headlights picked up movement at the edges of the trees, shadows darting between trunks, keeping pace with me. I told myself it was just the rain messing with my eyes, but my gut said otherwise. Something was following me. Not just one thing, maybe. Multiple shapes. Every now and then, I'd see a flash of pale skin or wet clothing in the beams before it vanished back into the forest. After what felt like forever, I came to a small gas station at a crossroads. It looked ancient, flickering fluorescent lights, peeling paint, the kind of place you'd expect to see in a photo from the 1970s. I pulled in, desperate for some human contact, and parked under the awning near the pumps. The place looked empty, but the lights inside were on. I ran through the rain and pushed open the door, the bell above it chiming weakly. The air inside was warm and smelled faintly of old coffee and damp cardboard. Behind the counter stood a man in his 50s, with deep lines etched into his face. He looked up from a newspaper, his expression unreadable. "Hell of a storm out there," he said in a voice that felt heavy, like he didn't say much anymore. I nodded, dripping onto the linoleum. "Yeah. Listen, do you know if the highway's still flooded? GPS sent me through some back roads, and there's someone out there. On the road. A guy just standing there." The attendant's face changed, but only slightly. A flicker of something. Fear? Recognition? He set his newspaper down slowly. "You saw him." It wasn't a question. My throat went dry. "Yeah. What is that? Do you know him?" He shook his head. "You didn't stop, did you?" "No. He started walking toward my car. I went around him." Isu, the man's eyes drifted toward the window, the rain streaking down the glass. "You're lucky. People who stop don't usually come back. That stretch of road's been bad since the flood years ago. People say it's the spirit of some trucker who drowned out there looking for a ride. But it's not just him anymore. Others show up too, now. They follow you." I stared at him, trying to decide if he was pulling my leg. "You're saying, what? Ghosts?" The attendant gave a slow shrug. "Call it what you want, but you're not the first person to come through here, scared out of their mind, saying they've been followed. Rain brings them out, always the rain." A cold shiver ran down my spine. "I think they're still out there," I whispered. He nodded grimly. "Then you best stay here until it lets up. Lock the doors. Don't open them for anyone you don't know." I bought a cup of coffee just to have something to do with my hands and sat at one of the tiny plastic tables near the window. Outside, the rain kept hammering down. The road was empty. For a while, nothing happened. I started to think maybe the whole thing had been my imagination, fueled by the storm and the eerie isolation. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. Across the lot, just at the edge of the light, a figure stood. Soaked, motionless, head tilted slightly. The same man from the road. My stomach dropped. "He's here," I hissed. The attendant moved to the door and pulled the blinds shut. "Don't look. Don't let him see you looking." My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. "Is he going to come inside?" The man didn't answer right away. Finally, he said, "Not unless you open the door." The storm raged on. Every so often I'd hear faint tapping at the windows, like fingers trailing along the glass. Once there was a low, drawn-out moan that cut through the sound of the rain, and I almost screamed. The attendant just stood behind the counter, eyes on the door, unmoving. Hours passed like that. My coffee went cold. My nerves frayed to threads. Outside, the figure never left. Sometimes I thought there were more of them now. Shapes moving in the dark, pale faces flashing briefly before vanishing again. By the time dawn broke and the rain slowed to a drizzle, I was a wreck. I peeked out from behind the blinds and saw nothing. The lot was empty. The attendant exhaled, a sound like relief. "You can go now," he said, "but don't come back this way if it's raining." I didn't need to be told twice. I left, my car still wet and cold from the storm. The back roads looked different in daylight, less menacing, more like just roads, but I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on me, even as the rain faded to nothing. When I finally got back to the main highway, I felt like I could breathe again, but deep down, I knew it wasn't over. Not really. Because ever since that night, whenever it rains, really rains, the kind that feels alive, I see them, just at the edge of my vision. A figure standing on the roadside, head bowed, hands at its sides, sometimes more than one, always watching, always waiting. and I never ever stop. Story the end. The rain had been steady since morning, but by dusk it had turned into a deluge. Heavy, punishing drops struck the hood of my truck with a sound like handfuls of gravel. I was driving through a rural stretch of western Kentucky, heading back from visiting my cousin who lived out in a tiny farming town. The roads there were always tricky in bad weather. Narrow, winding, lined with old oaks whose branches hung low enough to scrape across the roof as you passed. It was late September, and the air carried that strange chill of the changing season. The defroster in my truck wasn't working properly, so every few minutes I had to wipe the inside of the windshield with an old rag to keep the condensation from blinding me. The headlights barely pierced the curtain of rain, and the smell of wet earth and damp leaves crept in through the vents. There wasn't another car in sight. I hadn't seen headlights in either direction for miles. The radio had faded to static half an hour back, leaving me with nothing but the drumming of the storm and the low hum of my tires rolling through water. I had about an hour left to get home, and though I'd driven this back road dozens of times, the storm had warped everything. Familiar landmarks were hidden behind sheets of rain, and the trees loomed taller and darker than I remembered. Every now and then a flash of lightning would illuminate the landscape. A sodden field here, a broken-down barn there, then plunge it back into darkness again. As I rounded a bend, my headlights caught movement ahead. At first, I thought it was a deer or a dog, but as I slowed, I realized it was a person. They were standing right at the edge of the road, soaked through, facing me. They were tall, thin, and wore what looked like a gray coat that clung to them like a second skin. Their head was bent slightly, hood drawn up, but I could see strands of wet hair plastered to their face. They weren't holding their arm out for help or trying to flag me down, just standing there, still, watching my truck approach. I rolled the window down a crack and called out as I slowed. "Hey, you okay? Need a ride?" They didn't respond. I stopped the truck a few feet away, the engine idling loud in the rain. Up close, their coat looked shredded at the cuffs, and their boots were caked with mud. The puddle around their feet rippled, but they didn't seem to shiver or move at all. "Are you hurt?" I tried again, but my voice sounded weak in the storm. The figures slowly raised their head, and for a heartbeat, I caught a glimpse of their face in my headlights. It was pale, unnaturally pale, with dark smudges under the eyes, like someone who hadn't slept in weeks. Their lips were slightly parted, but no sound came out. A jolt of unease ran through me. Something about their stillness felt wrong. Every instinct screamed at me to drive on, but guilt held me there. This was a storm that could kill someone. "Look, I can call somebody," I started, but before I could finish, lightning cracked somewhere behind me, so close the thunder rattled my teeth. I blinked at the brightness, and when my eyes cleared, the figure was gone. Not walked away. Gone. The puddle where they'd stood still rippled like something had disturbed it a second before. I threw the truck into gear and drove, hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles hurt. My heart hammered as I checked the mirrors over and over, half expecting to see them standing in the road behind me. But there was nothing, just the endless rain. I told myself I was seeing things. The storm, the dim light, my own tiredness. My mind was making ghosts out of shadows. I kept repeating that as the road stretched ahead mile after empty mile. But about 15 minutes later, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. Something felt off in the cab of the truck, the way the air feels before lightning strikes. The storm outside roared, but inside it had gone eerily quiet, like the sound had been muffled. I glanced at the rearview mirror and nearly swerved off the road. In the back seat, just visible in the mirror, someone was sitting. They were soaked through, their gray coat dripping onto the seat, their hood still pulled low. Pale fingers rested limply on their knees. I whipped my head around, but the back seat was empty. Only the wet floor mat and the smell of damp fabric. My pulse raced. I wanted to pull over, but couldn't make myself stop. I drove faster, headlights cutting through the storm in narrow cones. Every shadow in the trees looked like someone waiting. As I approached a small wooden bridge, my headlights flashed across something at the far end. My stomach dropped, the same figure, standing dead center of the bridge. I hit the brakes hard, the truck sliding slightly on the slick boards. My headlights lit them up like a scene from a nightmare, dripping coat, hood low, pale face just visible beneath it. They were closer this time, and I could see water streaming from their fingers, pooling at their feet. The worst part was their eyes. They were open now, wide and dark, staring straight at me. I honked, but the sound felt swallowed by the rain. The figure didn't flinch. I threw the truck into reverse, wheels spinning as they caught the wet wood. The bridge groaned under me, and the storm roared louder, like it was laughing. I backed up until I was off the bridge, then turned hard into the shoulder, bumping over mud and grass to swing the truck around. When I looked back, the bridge was empty. I didn't care. I floored it back the way I'd come, taking the long route home through town no matter how late it made me. I didn't look in the mirror again until I was back on the main road with other cars around. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the storm still pounded on the roof. I sat there for a long time, engine running, too scared to move. When I finally did, I noticed something that made my stomach twist. On the back seat where I'd seen the figure, just for a second, was a small wet handprint. Bare, like a child's, pressed into the fabric. I didn't sleep that night. I kept hearing the rain, even after it stopped, like it was still dripping somewhere inside the house. Since then, every time I drive at night in the rain, I see them. Sometimes on the shoulder, sometimes in the distance. Always still, always watching. And every time I pass, I wonder if this will be the night they don't vanish when I blink. The rain had been falling since late afternoon, steady at first, then heavier as evening crept in, until it became a relentless torrent that blurred the world outside into shifting shadows and streaks of water. I was leaving a friend's place on the outskirts of town later than I had planned. He had begged me to stay the night, saying the storm wasn't worth driving through, but I had work in the morning and couldn't afford to miss it. I told myself it was just rain. I'd driven in worse before. By the time I got onto the back roads that cut through the wooded stretches outside of town, I realized I had underestimated just how bad it was. The wipers were useless against the flood of water hammering the windshield, and my headlights seemed swallowed by the darkness. Every bend in the road looked unfamiliar. The trees on either side bending under the weight of the storm, their branches reaching like claws across the slick pavement. I drove slow, cautious, my hands tight on the wheel when I caught movement in the glow of the high beams. At first I thought it was a deer, common enough on these roads, but as I drew closer, the shape grew clearer. It was a person, standing on the shoulder, soaked through, head bowed against the rain. I eased off the gas, heart quickening. Something about the figure didn't look right. They weren't waving, weren't moving, just standing there like they'd grown out of the earth itself. I slowed as I passed, catching a glimpse out of the corner of my eye. It was a woman. Her clothes were plastered to her frame, her long dark hair hanging over her face, dripping water in long strands. She didn't lift her head, didn't even seem to acknowledge my car as I rolled past. I wanted to stop. For a split second, instinct told me she needed help, but something colder, deeper, whispered that I should keep driving. And so I did, heart pounding, eyes glued to the slick road ahead. Maybe 10 minutes later, I saw her again. My stomach dropped when the beams lit her up on the opposite side of the road this time, standing just as still, hair covering her face, water running down her arms. It wasn't possible. I hadn't seen any side roads, no driveways, no paths. There was no way she could have gotten ahead of me. I pressed harder on the gas, refusing to look at her directly, but the thought of her standing there burned in my mind. The rain beat harder, like fists against the roof of my car, and I turned the radio up just to hear something other than the storm. It didn't help. A few miles later, the beams cut through the rain and found her again. This time, she was in the middle of the road. I swerved violently, the tires skidding across the wet pavement, my chest seizing with panic. Somehow, I managed to miss her, pulling the car back under control. My breath came in sharp gasps, my fingers numb on the wheel. When I glanced in the mirror, expecting to see her standing there was nothing. Just rain and blacktop stretching behind me. I didn't stop driving until I reached the safety of town, pulling into a gas station under the harsh glow of fluorescent lights. I sat there for a long while, staring at the rain sliding down the glass, trying to convince myself it was exhaustion, the storm. a trick of my eyes. But when I finally looked at the passenger side window, my blood ran cold. There were streaks in the condensation, 5 long marks trailing down the glass, like someone had dragged their soaked fingers across it from the inside. I locked the doors immediately, my whole body trembling. That night I didn't sleep. I lay awake listening to the rain batter against the roof of my apartment, half expecting to hear footsteps outside my door. It's been months since then. I still take those roads sometimes because they're the fastest way home, but every time it rains, I see her again. Sometimes standing on the shoulder, sometimes walking slowly along the ditch, her hair covering her face. Once she was closer than ever, so close I could see her pale lips, parted as if she were whispering something I couldn't hear over the storm. I never stop. I never look for long. But the feeling stays with me long after the rain has passed, an icy weight that settles deep in my chest. The worst part is not when I see her, but when I don't, because that's when I can't shake the thought that she's not outside anymore, that maybe she's in the back seat, sitting silently in the dark, dripping rainwater onto the fabric, waiting for me to notice. Story the end. The storm rolled in heavy that night, the kind of downpour that makes the world outside look foreign, as if the rain itself erases familiar landmarks and replaces them with something darker. I had been out late, working extra hours at the shop where I did repairs, and by the time I clocked out, it was nearly midnight. The streets were empty, washed out under the pounding rain, and the neon glow of the liquor store across from the lot bled across puddles like blood in water. I sat in my truck for a few minutes before starting the engine, watching the rain hammer against the windshield, half tempted to just sleep there until morning. But the thought of the cold seeping in convinced me otherwise, and I finally pulled out onto the road, wipers slashing uselessly against the torrent. The drive home should have been simple, just 2 towns over, but within 10 minutes, the storm swallowed every sense of direction. Street signs bent under the weight of water, visibility shrank to just a few feet, and each passing moment felt like I was driving deeper into an endless tunnel. The rain made everything feel claustrophobic, soundless, except for the roar of water. At one point, my headlights picked up a figure on the shoulder. At first I thought it was a deer, but as I slowed, the shape sharpened into a man standing in the rain. He wore what looked like a work jacket, heavy boots, and no hat, his head bent slightly forward as though he'd been waiting. He raised his arm slowly, a thumb extended. My chest tightened. I told myself to keep driving, that picking someone up in the middle of a storm this late at night wasn't smart, but I couldn't shake the thought of leaving someone stranded. The storm was brutal, and if his car had died, he could freeze out here. Against my instincts, I braked and rolled down the passenger side window a crack. "You need a ride?" I called. He leaned toward the opening, rain dripping from his face. His skin looked pale, too pale, and his eyes were shadowed. "Just up the road," he said, voice low but oddly clear over the storm. I hesitated, but unlocked the door. He slid in slowly, water soaking into the seat. He didn't say, "Thank you," didn't even glance at me, just stared ahead into the windshield, his hands resting flat on his thighs. The smell hit me a moment later. Damp earth, but mixed with something sharper, metallic. I tried to break the silence. "So, your car breakdown?" He didn't answer right away. Finally, he said, "Left it behind." "Where at?" I asked. "On the road." The way he said it, flat without detail, made my stomach twist. I gripped the wheel tighter and focused on the road. The rain pounded so hard that even with the wipers on full blast, I could barely see beyond the hood of the truck. We drove in silence for several miles. My unease grew with each passing minute, the way his body sat so rigid, how his clothes clung to him as though they'd been soaked for hours. At one point, I risked a glance sideways, and what I saw made my skin crawl. His boots were caked in mud, but not just mud. Dark patches stained his pant legs, spreading in irregular shapes. I forced myself to look away, telling myself I was imagining things, that it was just water. But the smell grew stronger, iron-like, the way pennies taste when you hold them in your mouth. Finally, he spoke again, startling me. "Turn here." There was a narrow dirt road to the right, almost invisible in the storm. I shook my head. "That doesn't go toward town." "Turn here," he repeated, firmer this time. I didn't. My gut screamed at me not to. I kept driving, pretending I hadn't heard him. For the first time, he turned his head toward me, and I wished I hadn't looked. His eyes weren't just pale, they looked clouded, as if filmed over, lifeless. His lips parted slightly, and I thought I saw blood at the corner of his mouth. My chest seized, and I pressed harder on the gas. The rain howled against the windshield, but all I could hear was my own heartbeat. After another few minutes of silence, I glanced toward the passenger seat, only to find it empty. The seat was soaked through, dripping, but he was gone. No sound of the door opening, no trace of where he'd gone, just the ghost of that metallic smell hanging thick in the cab. I slammed the brakes, my truck skidding slightly on the wet pavement, and whipped my head around in disbelief. Nothing. Just rain, endless and heavy, washing down the empty road. I drove the rest of the way home shaking, the feeling of eyes on me lingering the whole time. When I finally pulled into my driveway and cut the engine, the silence hit like a weight. I sat there, trying to calm my breathing until I saw something in the rearview mirror. Through the glass, illuminated by the faint glow of my porch light, was the shape of a man standing at the end of the drive, rain cascading off his shoulders, head bent, arms at his sides. I blinked, and he was gone. I never saw him again, but every time it rains heavy, I catch myself looking at the roadside, half expecting to see a man waiting there, hand raised, ready to climb back into the truck. Story, the end. The rain had started in the late afternoon, a steady patter against the windows that turned into a full-blown storm by nightfall. I had been visiting a friend in the next town over and stayed longer than I planned, so by the time I got into my car, the streets were nearly deserted. The downpour had chased everyone else indoors. I debated waiting it out, but the thought of sitting in an empty parking lot with rain hammering on the roof made me uneasy, so I decided to drive. The first few miles weren't too bad, though I had to keep the wipers on full blast just to see 10 feet in front of me. My headlights cut through the wall of rain in narrow beams, the drops streaking past so fast they looked like falling lines of light. The deeper I drove into the countryside, the darker it got. No streetlights out there, just trees on both sides of the road, their silhouettes bending in the wind. About 20 minutes in, I came around a bend and saw what looked like a stalled car on the shoulder. Its hazard lights blinked weakly through the rain. I slowed down instinctively, my tires sliding a little on the wet pavement. But as I got closer, I realized the car was empty. The doors were shut, but no one was inside, no one standing nearby. Just an abandoned vehicle flashing red against the storm. I kept going, a strange unease creeping into me. The rain grew heavier, the road slicker. Every so often, the lightning lit up the trees, and in those blinding flashes, the shadows seemed to move. I told myself it was just my tired eyes, the storm playing tricks, but the sensation of being watched kept gnawing at me. A few miles past the empty car, I saw something else. At first, I thought it was a tree branch fallen across the road, but then it shifted. A person was standing there, right in the middle of the lane, drenched from head to toe. I slammed on the brakes, heart leaping into my throat, and the car skidded dangerously before jerking to a halt just a few feet from them. The figure didn't move, didn't flinch. They just stood there, head bowed, rain pouring over their hair and clothes. I couldn't make out a face, just the outline of their body illuminated by my headlights. My first thought was that they must need help, maybe the owner of the stalled car I'd passed earlier. I rolled down my window slightly, rain immediately splashing inside, and called out, "Hey, are you okay? Do you need help?" Nothing. No response. I tried again, louder this time, but the storm swallowed my voice. The figure didn't so much as twitch. That's when something in my gut twisted. Every instinct screamed at me not to get out of the car. The way they stood, limp and unnatural, wasn't right. I put the car in reverse, tires hissing on the wet road, and carefully backed up before steering around them. As I passed, I couldn't help glancing over. Through the blur of rain, I saw their heads slowly turning, following me as I drove by. My chest tightened. I hit the gas harder than I meant to, the car fishtailing before I straightened it out. My knuckles were white on the wheel. I told myself it had to be some drunk, some person caught in the storm and disoriented. But deep down, I didn't believe it. The storm raged on. Another half hour passed, and I thought I was finally leaving it all behind when my headlights landed on something that nearly made me scream. There, on the side of the road, was the same figure. standing exactly the same way, head bowed, rain streaming down their body. It wasn't possible. I had driven too far, too fast. There was no way they could have gotten ahead of me. And yet, there they were. I didn't stop this time. I swerved to avoid them, keeping my eyes straight ahead, but I felt it. Their head turning again, watching me as I passed. The next time I saw them, I almost lost control. Another bend, another flash of lightning, and suddenly they were standing in the middle of the road again. Only this time, their face was visible for the first time, pale, almost glowing in my headlights. Their mouth was open wide, far too wide, though no sound came out. Just the rain, pounding harder and harder. I drove around them, heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. My breaths came fast and shallow, fogging the inside of the windshield. Every mile stretched into eternity, and every shadow looked like another figure waiting in the storm. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I barely remembered the last leg of the trip. My hands shook as I killed the engine, the silence deafening after the endless roar of the storm. I stumbled inside, dripping water everywhere, and locked the door behind me. I thought I'd left it all on the road, but when I went to the window, I froze. Through the sheets of rain at the edge of my yard near the trees, someone was standing there, head bowed, still as stone, watching. The lights flickered once, the storm rattling the walls of the house, and when I looked back, the yard was empty. But even now, when the rain falls hard enough, I catch myself staring at the tree line, waiting to see if that figure will appear again. Story the end. The storm had rolled in quick, the kind that didn't give you much warning. One minute the sky was heavy and gray, the next it split open, dumping sheets of water so thick the wipers couldn't keep up. I was heading back from visiting my sister 2 towns over, later than I meant to, and now I was caught in the kind of night drive I'd always tried to avoid. The back roads there were nothing but blacktop, cutting through long stretches of woods and farmland, and when the rain hit like that, it swallowed everything. No moonlight, no stars, just headlights carving out a narrow tunnel ahead of me. I told myself it was fine. I knew the route, I'd driven it dozens of times. But the rain distorted everything. The trees bent in strange shapes, shadows moved when they shouldn't, and every mile felt longer than the last. I was 10 minutes outside town when I saw her. At first, I thought it was a trick of the headlights. The storm made everything ripple, water streaking across the windshield in waves, but then the outline sharpened. A woman. She was walking along the right side of the road. No umbrella, no jacket, just a pale dress plastered to her skin by the rain. Her hair hung in long, dark strands down her back, and she didn't lift her head as I approached. I slowed, unease prickling the back of my neck. What was she doing out there in weather like this? There weren't houses for miles in either direction. My first thought was maybe she'd been in an accident, but I didn't see any wreckage, no car lights in the ditch. I rolled the window down an inch, leaned toward the glass, and called out, "Ma'am, you okay? Need a ride?" She didn't answer, didn't even turn her head. She just kept walking, slow and steady, as if the storm wasn't drenching her. Something about the way she moved made me hesitate. Not stumbling, not rushing, just moving at the same pace, step after step, like she wasn't even aware of me. My gut twisted, that deep instinct that tells you something isn't right. I eased past her, trying to shake the feeling, but when I checked the mirror, I saw her stop, just stop walking. Then her head lifted, and even from that distance, I swore she was looking straight at me. The hair on my arms stood on end. I pressed the gas harder, focusing on the road, refusing to glance back again. I thought that was it. Just one of those strange, unsettling moments you carry with you, but leave behind once you get home. But not even 5 minutes later, I rounded a bend and nearly slammed on the brakes. She was there. The same woman, same drenched dress, same hair hanging down, same steady steps on the right shoulder of the road. I sat frozen, staring, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. There was no way she could have gotten ahead of me. Not walking. Not in this storm. This time I didn't slow down. I pressed the accelerator, pushing past her, refusing to look, refusing to see if she turned her head again. My pulse was hammering in my ears, the rain smearing the world into gray streaks, and I just kept telling myself, "Don't stop. Don't stop." The rest of the drive felt endless. Every stretch of road, every curve, I expected to see her again. My eyes flicked to the mirrors too often, searching the rain for shapes, but somehow I didn't see her again before I finally reached the outskirts of town. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the storm was still pounding, the gutters overflowing, the yard turning into shallow pools of water. I killed the engine, sat there catching my breath, telling myself I was safe now. Just a long, wet drive. Just a woman on the side of the road, no matter how strange it seemed. But then I heard it. A soft, deliberate knock against the back window. I froze. My whole body locked up. Slowly, I turned my head, the rain making it hard to see through the glass. But for just a second, in the blurred reflection of the porch light, I saw her. Her pale face, her soaked hair, her eyes fixed on me from the other side of the glass. I bolted. I grabbed my bag, shoved the door open, and sprinted through the rain to the porch, fumbling with the keys before throwing myself inside and slamming the door behind me. I locked it, then the deadbolt, then pressed my back against it, listening. The rain drowned out almost everything, but underneath it I swore I heard something, a faint sound, like footsteps splashing slowly through the yard. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind against the siding made me jolt. I left every light on, sitting in the living room watching the windows. By morning, the storm had passed. The world outside was quiet, the grass flattened by water, the air smelling of wet earth. I told myself it was just the weather, just exhaustion playing tricks on me. But when I went out to the car, I stopped dead. There were wet footprints, bare human footprints, leading from the driveway to the porch, and they stopped right at my front door. Story the end. The rain had started earlier than expected that night, turning the air heavy and damp as the clouds broke open over the hills. By the time I left the small diner where I'd been meeting a friend, the world outside was already drowned in sheets of water. The parking lot glistened like black glass, neon signs warped in the puddles, their buzzing reflections rippling with every drop. My friend had begged me to wait it out, maybe have one more cup of coffee until the storm eased, but it was late. I was tired, and I had an early morning. I told her I'd be fine. I wasn't fine. The drive home took me along a 2-lane country road that stretched for miles without so much as a streetlight. The rain hammered the roof of my car, drowning out the hum of the engine, forcing the wipers into overdrive. The beams of my headlights struggled against the storm, illuminating only a narrow slice of the soaked asphalt ahead. Trees pressed in close on either side, their branches shifting and dripping, their shadows twisting with every flicker of lightning. The first half of the trip was uneventful, though unnerving. My nerves were already frayed just from the strain of driving through the storm. Then I saw something up ahead. At first, I thought it was a deer caught in the lights. The shape was hunched and still, right by the edge of the road. As I slowed, my stomach turned cold. It wasn't a deer. It was a man. He stood completely still, shoulders slumped, rain pouring over him. His clothes clung to his frame, too dark to make out clearly, but his face, God, his face was pale, almost luminescent in the headlights. His eyes were open wide, unblinking as he stared directly at my car. I drove past him slowly, unsure of what to do. It wasn't unusual to see someone stranded, but there had been no broken-down car nearby, no bike, nothing. Just him, standing there, as though he'd been waiting. When I checked my rearview mirror, my chest seized. He had turned. Though he hadn't moved as I passed, now he was facing my car, head tilted slightly, eyes fixed on me. Through the blur of rain and glass, I saw his lips twitch upward into the faintest suggestion of a smile. I tore my eyes from the mirror, heart pounding, hands slick with sweat despite the chill. I pressed harder on the gas, desperate to put distance between myself and the figure. I told myself he was just a drifter, someone lost or out of his mind. That was the only explanation that made sense. But then I saw him again. Less than 2 miles down the road, my headlights picked him up standing on the shoulder once more. This time his head was already turned, waiting for me. My grip on the steering wheel tightened so hard it hurt. I tried to reason with myself. It couldn't be him. It had to be a different man, maybe someone else walking the road. But deep down, I knew. It was the same person, same wet clothes clinging to the same pale frame, same unblinking eyes. As I passed him the second time, a horrible thought took root. He wanted me to see him. The storm grew heavier, lightning splitting the sky in brilliant flashes, thunder shaking the ground beneath my tires. I leaned forward, trying to focus through the blur of rain. My pulse was racing, my body buzzing with the urge to keep driving, faster and faster, no matter how dangerous the slick road became. But then, there he was again. This time, he wasn't on the shoulder. He was in the middle of the road. I slammed on the brakes, tires screeching, my car fishtailing as it slid on the wet pavement. For a split second, my headlights illuminated him perfectly. Standing tall, arms hanging limp at his sides, water dripping from his hair. His mouth was open just slightly, but not enough to form words. His eyes never left mine. When the car finally skidded to a halt, the road was empty. I sat there shaking, chest heaving, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. My headlights glared at the vacant stretch of road ahead, the rain falling harder than ever. He was gone. Completely gone. I didn't even realize tears were sliding down my face until I wiped them with the back of my sleeve. My throat was dry, my stomach twisting. I didn't want to move forward. I didn't want to go back. I just wanted to be anywhere but there. Finally, with a deep breath, I forced the car forward, inching ahead at a crawl. Every nerve in my body was on fire, my eyes darting from side to side, searching the trees, the ditches, the shadows. I wanted to believe it was all in my head, that stress and exhaustion were making me see things. But when I finally glanced up at the rearview mirror, my blood turned to ice. He was in the back seat. Sitting there, soaked, silent, his head bent slightly forward. His pale face reflected in the mirror, lips parted in that same ghost of a smile. Water dripped from his hair onto the seat, though the fabric beneath him stayed perfectly dry. His eyes met mine in the reflection, and my heart nearly stopped. I screamed, swerving so violently I nearly lost control of the car. I couldn't look back. I couldn't. I kept my eyes locked on the road ahead, tears streaming, breath heaving, my whole body trembling as I floored the gas pedal. I didn't stop until I reached the lights of town. I pulled into a gas station, slammed the car into park, and bolted out into the rain, leaving the engine running and the door wide open. I stood there in the downpour, gasping, scanning the inside of the car through the open door. The back seat was empty. No trace of him. No water. Nothing. But I couldn't bring myself to get back in. Not that night. I waited inside the gas station until morning, shaking, staring at my car through the glass windows, half expecting to see him sitting inside, watching me. Even now, years later, I don't take that road when it rains. And sometimes when I catch my reflection in the rearview mirror, I still feel the faintest prickling at the back of my neck, as though he's waiting for me to notice him again. Story the end. The rain was coming down so hard, it felt like the sky had split open. Not a soft drizzle, not even a steady shower. This was the kind of rain that blurred the world, made everything dissolve into streaks and shadows. I was headed back from a friend's house in rural West Virginia, a drive I'd done dozens of times, but never in weather like this. The two-lane road wound through mountains and valleys, trees pressing close on either side, their leaves glistening black with water. There were no shoulders, no lights, no houses for miles. Just me, my car, and the storm. It was close to midnight when my wipers finally started to lose the battle. They squealed across the glass, smearing instead of clearing, and I had to lean forward to see the road at all. The headlights illuminated nothing but a dense curtain of rain and occasional glimpses of pavement. I slowed to 30, maybe 25, my tires hissing over slick asphalt. My cell signal had died 20 minutes back, so even my usual habit of playing a podcast for company was gone. The silence inside my car was deafening, broken only by the hammering rain and the low drone of the engine. Somewhere near a sharp marked by a warped old guardrail, I noticed a flash of pale color in the beam of my headlights. I hit the brakes gently, thinking maybe it was an animal. But when I got closer, I realized it wasn't an animal at all. It was a woman. She stood just off the road in the downpour, wearing a light dress completely soaked, clinging to her skin. Her hair was plastered to her face. She didn't raise a hand, didn't wave for help, didn't even look at me. She was just there, motionless, head slightly tilted as if she'd been waiting. I pulled up beside her, lowering the passenger window an inch. "Ma'am, are you okay? Do you need a ride?" I had to shout over the rain. She didn't answer. Didn't blink. Just stood there, water streaming off her like she was part of the storm itself. I hesitated. My gut screamed at me to drive on, but my conscience wouldn't let me. This was the middle of nowhere. Leaving her there felt like a death sentence. I unlocked the door. "You can get in," I called, voice shaking a little. "It's freezing out here." She moved then, slowly, like her limbs were stiff, and opened the door. The interior light flicked on, casting a pale glow over her. She was young, maybe early 20s, skin pale enough to seem almost translucent under the car light. She didn't speak. She just slid into the seat, dripping onto the upholstery. I could smell the rain on her clothes, sharp and earthy. I tried again. "Do you live nearby? Do you want me to take you to a hospital or something?" She finally turned to look at me. Her eyes were dark, too dark. Almost no whites at all, just huge pupils swallowing up the iris. And her expression was empty. Not sad, not scared, just empty. I forced myself to look back at the road. "Okay, I'll just drive then." My voice was weak. Something in me had shifted the moment she looked at me, a primal sense of danger pressing at the back of my mind. We drove in silence for miles. She didn't move, didn't shiver, didn't even seem to breathe. I risked a glance at her once or twice, and each time she was staring straight ahead, hands folded neatly in her lap. The sound of the rain seemed louder with her there, hammering at the roof, echoing in my ears. At one point, we passed an old wooden sign for a closed-down campground. I swear I heard her whisper something then, but the rain swallowed it. When I asked what she said, she didn't respond. The road began to climb, twisting through the mountain. My headlights flickered once, twice. I tapped the dashboard nervously. "Don't do this now," I muttered to the car. My fingers were clammy on the steering wheel. Then she spoke. Her voice was soft, almost lost under the rain. "You shouldn't have stopped." My stomach dropped. "What?" She didn't answer, just stared out the windshield. I felt a cold draft sweep through the car, even though the windows were up. My breath fogged. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice cracking. She slowly turned her head toward me. Her wet hair clung to her cheek. "He's behind us," she whispered. I nearly slammed the brakes. "Who? What are you?" Before I could finish, there was a thump on the roof. Loud, heavy, like something had landed on the car. My heart stopped. I gripped the wheel with both hands. Another thump, closer to the windshield. I risked a glance at the rearview mirror, but there was nothing there, just rain and blackness. Another thump. This time the whole car shuddered. "Keep driving," she said, her voice suddenly sharp. "Don't stop." "What is that?" I shouted, panic rising in my throat. "Keep driving," she repeated. Her eyes were locked on the road ahead now, wide and unblinking. I floored the gas. The car surged forward, engine whining as we hit 40, 50, even on the slick road. The thumps continued, like footsteps pacing the roof. Faster. Harder. Then claws, at least it sounded like claws, scraped across the metal. I could hear it even over the storm, a screeching like nails on a chalkboard. I was crying now, tears mixing with sweat. "What's on my car?" She didn't answer. She just stared ahead, whispering something under her breath. I caught fragments. "Too late." "He waits," the rain, but nothing made sense. Another screech, then a loud bang on the trunk. The car fishtailed, and I fought the wheel to keep control. "I can't do this," I sobbed. "I can't." Suddenly she screamed, a high, piercing sound that cut through the storm like a knife. "Drive." I did. I don't remember the next few minutes clearly, just rain, speed, terror. The thumps stopped. The scraping stopped. It was just the storm again. When I finally dared to slow down, my hands trembling, I turned to her. "What the hell was that?" I shouted. But the seat was empty. She was gone. The passenger seat was wet but empty. The door was still closed. My headlights caught nothing but rain and trees. My heart thudded so loud it drowned out the storm. I drove the rest of the way home in a daze, barely seeing the road. When I pulled into my driveway, I jumped out of the car, rain soaking me instantly, and ran inside. I didn't stop to look at the car until morning. When I did, my stomach turned. Long, deep gouges ran the length of the roof and trunk. Not like branches had scraped it. These were evenly spaced, curved, like something had gripped the car with massive claws. And on the passenger seat, still damp, was a single strand of long, dark hair. I've since learned that stretch of road has its stories. People talk about a girl who drowned in the river near the campground decades ago, about truckers who hear footsteps on their roofs during storms, about drivers who vanish on rainy nights. Nobody can prove any of it. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt. And every time it rains hard, I hear faint thumps on my roof at night. Soft at first, then louder, like something's testing the weight. like something's trying to climb in. I don't drive that road anymore, but the rain always finds me. Story the end. The rain was already falling in sheets when I left my friend's apartment on the edge of Columbus, Ohio that night. It was one of those storms where the sky feels like it's pressing down on you, low and heavy, and the streetlights flicker like they're about to go out. I had stayed too late, talking and drinking coffee, and now it was well past midnight. My car, parked on a side street a block away, was the only one left out there. As soon as I stepped outside, the rain plastered my hair to my forehead. Water pooled along the cracked sidewalk, running like tiny rivers down toward the street drains. My shoes squelched with every step. The whole neighborhood seemed deserted. Even the usual hum of traffic on the nearby interstate had died down to nothing. The only sound was the rain hammering on rooftops and asphalt. I didn't think twice about walking to my car. This was a familiar area, and though it had its share of crime, I wasn't exactly scared. But halfway down the block, under the dim orange glow of a flickering streetlight, I saw a shape that stopped me in my tracks. At first, I thought it was just a person in a hooded raincoat standing at the edge of the curb, head down, facing the street. But as I squinted through the rain, the shape didn't seem right. Too tall, too thin, and utterly motionless. Even in the heavy downpour, it didn't shift or fidget or shiver. I forced myself to keep moving, hugging my coat tighter. My keys were clutched in my fist. My car was parked only 3 spots from where the figure stood. I tried to tell myself it was just someone waiting for a ride or walking home, but my gut twisted the closer I got. When I was maybe 20 feet away, a bolt of lightning lit up the street. For an instant, everything was sharp and clear, like a photograph. The figure's face was shadowed, but its arms were long, too long, and its hands hung low at almost reaching its knees. It was facing me, not the street. Its head tilted slightly as if it were curious. The lightning faded. My heart was pounding. I tried not to run, but my steps quickened automatically. I reached my car, fumbling with the keys, and as I glanced up again, the figure had moved. It was standing in the street now, directly behind my car, maybe 30 feet away. I jumped inside, slammed the lock button, and started the engine. The rain was so heavy I could barely see out of the windshield. My wipers squealed across the glass as they swiped back and forth. When I looked up, the figure was closer. Not running, not walking, just closer. It was impossible, like it had blinked forward. Panic shot through me. I threw the car into drive and floored it, tires spinning on the wet pavement before catching traction. The figure disappeared from my rearview mirror as I sped down the street, but I couldn't shake the feeling it was following me. I turned onto a larger road, then another, weaving through empty intersections, rain hammering on the roof. Every few blocks, I'd glance in the mirror. Sometimes I thought I saw something, a tall, dark shape in the distance. Other times, nothing. My rational brain kept insisting it was just rain, shadows, exhaustion, but my gut knew better. I decided to head for a 24-hour diner a few miles away. It was one of the few places open this late, a bright spot in the middle of the storm. As I drove, my phone buzzed. When I picked it up at a red light, the screen was blank. No call, no notification, just the faint sound of static. I dropped it instantly, my pulse spiking. By the time I reached the diner, the parking lot was empty, except for a single delivery truck parked near the back. I pulled into a space near the entrance and practically ran inside. The bell above the door jingled as I stepped in, dripping water all over the linoleum. There was only one person behind the counter, a tired-looking man in his 50s with a name tag that said Carl. He gave me a polite nod but didn't ask questions. I slid into a booth near the window, trying to calm my breathing. Outside, the rain blurred everything into streaks of gray and black. But when the lightning flashed again, I saw it, standing just beyond the edge of the parking lot, near the delivery truck. A tall black shape, unmoving, watching the diner. I nearly screamed. Carl must have seen my face because he came over. "You okay, buddy?" he asked. I pointed to the window, but when we both looked, there was nothing there. Just rain and empty asphalt. Carl frowned. "Storm's messing with your eyes. Happens." I nodded weakly, though my hands were shaking. I ordered coffee just to have something to do. Carl went back behind the counter. I stared out the window, waiting for another flash of lightning. When it came, the figure was closer, this time at the edge of the lot next to the neon sign. its head tilted the same way. I bolted from the booth and ran to Carl. "Call the police," I whispered. "Please." He hesitated, then grabbed the phone. I turned back to the window. No figure. The police came about 15 minutes later. They took my statement, looked around, and found nothing. No footprints, no sign of anyone walking in the rain. They left after assuring me it was probably just some weirdo playing a prank or my imagination. I sat there another hour, sipping cold coffee, until the rain slowed to a drizzle. When I finally left, Carl gave me a sympathetic look. "Get some rest," he said. I drove home slowly, every muscle in my body tense. The roads were slick, the streetlights dim. When I pulled into my driveway, I felt a flicker of relief. Home. Safe. But when I got out of the car and walked to my front door, I noticed something on the porch. A puddle of water, and in the center of it, a long, black feather. I haven't been back to that diner since, and I never park my car far from an entrance anymore. But on stormy nights, when the rain pounds against my windows and the streetlights flicker, I sometimes see it. A tall, dark shape at the edge of my yard, tilting its head, watching. Waiting. Story the end. The rain had been falling since noon, and by nightfall, the town felt like it had been cut off from the rest of the world. Sheets of water blurred the streetlights into glowing orbs and turned every road into a glistening ribbon of black. I had just finished my shift at a small diner off the highway in western Ohio. It was one of those places that closed late but not quite late enough for the drunks and the truckers, and after mopping floors and cleaning grease traps all evening, all I wanted was to get home, take a hot shower, and sleep. My route was the same every night. Leave the diner, cut across an old county road for 10 miles, then hit a back road that led straight to my rental house on the edge of town. That county road was always quiet, but tonight it was eerily deserted. Not a single set of headlights behind me or ahead of me. Just the rain hammering down and my wipers swiping frantically back and forth. As soon as I turned onto the county road, my stomach tightened. The trees on either side leaned over like dark sentinels, and the rain muted everything. No crickets, no rustling, nothing but the endless hiss of water on pavement. My headlights carved out a narrow tunnel of visibility, but even that was warped by the steady downpour. I told myself it was just the weather making me anxious. About 3 miles in, I saw something that made my skin crawl. A figure was standing on the side of the road ahead. At first, I thought it was just a mailbox or a road sign, but as I got closer, it became clear. A person, completely still, drenched, staring straight ahead. They didn't wave me down, didn't even move as my headlights swept over them. Their head was slightly tilted, hair plastered to their face, and their hands hung limply at their sides. I slowed instinctively, but something inside me screamed not to stop. I eased past them, gripping the wheel tight, refusing to look directly at their face. But even from my peripheral vision, I could tell their skin was pale, almost gray, like a drowned body pulled from a river. By the time I glanced in the rearview mirror, the rain had swallowed them whole. My heart thudded as I tried to rationalize what I'd just seen. Maybe they'd been in a wreck. Maybe they were drunk and walking home. Maybe it was nothing. But then, a mile later, I saw them again. This time they were on the opposite side of the road, standing in the same rigid posture, head tilted the same way, staring as I approached. My knuckles went white on the steering wheel. There was no way they could have gotten ahead of me on foot in this weather, not without me passing them or seeing a car. Yet there they were, identical down to the soaked clothing and the pale skin. I pressed the accelerator, not daring to slow down. My tires hissed against the wet asphalt, the sound mixing with the pounding rain. I kept glancing at my mirrors, but nothing was there. 5 miles to go. My pulse pounded in my ears as I tried to keep my eyes fixed on the road. But the rain was coming down harder now, almost sideways, and the wipers could barely keep up. That's when I saw them a third time. This time they weren't on the shoulder. They were in the middle of the road, standing directly in my lane facing me. The pale outline of their face caught the glow of my headlights, their eyes like black pits. I slammed the brakes, my car skidding slightly before stopping just yards away. My heart hammered as we locked eyes through the rain-smeared windshield. They didn't move. Then, without taking a single step, they seemed to slide backward into the darkness. Not turning, not walking, just retreating as if the rain itself was pulling them away. Within seconds, they were gone. I didn't think. I just drove. My foot was heavy on the gas pedal, my vision tunneling. The road curved and dipped, my headlights catching glimpses of drenched branches and flooded ditches. My hands trembled on the wheel, but I couldn't stop. I didn't dare. When I finally reached the outskirts of town, relief started to wash over me. The glow of streetlights, the familiar outlines of gas stations and houses, it all felt like salvation. But just as I slowed to make the last turn toward my house, I saw something that froze me completely. Under a flickering street lamp, standing on the corner near my driveway, was the same figure. Drenched, head tilted, staring. No movement, no expression, just waiting. My headlights hit them full on, and for a split second I swore their lips moved, as if they were whispering something I couldn't hear over the rain. I didn't stop. I turned into my driveway and sped up it, barely braking before I reached the garage. I killed the engine, sat there shaking, listening to the rain drumming on the roof. My eyes flicked to the mirrors, half expecting to see them right behind me. When I finally got the courage to open the door and sprint to the house, I locked everything up tight. The rain outside felt heavier than ever, pressing against the windows like a living thing. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time the gutters overflowed or the wind shifted, I thought I heard footsteps outside. For weeks afterward, I avoided that county road entirely. But sometimes, even in town on rainy nights, I catch glimpses out of the corner of my eye. Someone standing just beyond the streetlight, head tilted, drenched and waiting. And I've never once had the nerve to look directly at them. Story, the end. The night it started raining, I was driving home from a late shift at the gas station. The storm came out of nowhere, sudden and violent, turning the road slick and reflective, making everything look distorted under the streetlights. I live on the outskirts of a small town in Ohio where the streets are narrow and quiet at night, and tonight they were nearly empty, except for the occasional car splashing through puddles. I had my windshield wipers on full blast, the rhythmic swish barely keeping up with the sheets of rain hammering down. My headlights barely penetrated the foggy air, and every shadow seemed like it could be someone or something lurking just beyond the reach of my vision. I was almost halfway home when I noticed a figure standing by the side of the road. At first, I thought it was a hitchhiker, soaked to the bone, waving me down. But as I slowed the car, I realized it wasn't waving. It was just standing, perfectly still, staring at me. I squinted through the rain and the fogged-up windshield. The figure was tall, unnaturally tall and thin. Its face was obscured by a hood, but even from this distance I could feel its gaze. My stomach dropped. There was something wrong about it. Something that didn't feel human. I thought about stopping, thinking maybe someone needed help. But before I could make a decision, the figure raised its arm, pointing directly at my car. My instincts screamed at me not to stop. I hit the gas, my tires skidding slightly on the wet asphalt, and the figure didn't move. It just stood there, but in the brief moment I passed it, I thought I saw it leaning forward, almost lunging. I didn't look back. The road home felt endless, a winding stretch of asphalt through the woods. The rain was relentless, the windshield smeared with water that refused to clear, no matter how fast the wipers moved. I tried to call my girlfriend on my phone, but there was no signal. The storm had knocked out cell service, along with the streetlights in some areas. The darkness was complete, broken only by my headlights slicing through the rain. About 10 miles from home, I took a curve too fast. My tires skidded on the wet leaves and mud at the edge of the road. I corrected just in time, but as I regained control, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There, standing in the middle of the lane ahead, was the same figure. Taller than before, its hood dripping water, standing as if it had just materialized. I slammed on the brakes, skidding again, and swerved to avoid it. When I looked back in the rearview mirror, I thought I was safe. The figure wasn't on the road. I exhaled shakily, my heart hammering in my chest. But then I noticed it. Not in front of me, not in the lane behind me, but in the trees on the side of the road, just barely visible through the rain. It was moving alongside the car, almost gliding, keeping pace without making a sound. Panic took over. I floored the accelerator, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. The radio, which had been off, suddenly crackled to life, hissing static, and a low voice whispered over it, "Don't stop." Don't stop. My pulse skyrocketed. I tried changing stations, turning the radio off, but the voice persisted, soft, patient, yet horrifyingly insistent. I reached the edge of town and turned onto the main street, hoping the presence of other cars or people would deter it. But the streetlights flickered and died as I passed, and the whisper followed me through the static, clearer now. You can't hide. I tried to rationalize. Maybe it was someone messing with me, a prankster hiding in the woods, maybe even a hallucination from the long hours and stress, but deep down, I knew it was something else. Something older, something patient, something that had been waiting for rain to come alive. I decided to pull into a gas station, hoping to find someone awake, anyone, to stay with until the storm passed. I parked under the flickering canopy and rushed inside, soaked and shivering. The attendant, a young guy with a bored expression, looked up at me. I tried to explain, but the words came out jumbled, frantic. He just shrugged. It's raining, man. People get paranoid. I didn't argue. I bought a bottle of water and sat near the window, watching the rain fall in sheets. That's when I saw it again, reflected faintly in the wet asphalt outside. Standing at the edge of the lot, just beyond the reach of the light, it was tall, impossibly thin, and still completely still. Its hood covered its face, but I could feel it watching. The attendant noticed me staring. "What is it?" he asked. I shook my head, not trusting my voice. I kept my eyes on it, trying to gauge if it was real or just my imagination running wild. Then, without warning, it stepped forward, into the light, just slightly, and I saw its face. Or rather, the absence of one. Pure blackness, like a void, not skin, not shadow, just empty. And it smiled. Or I imagined it did. Without lips, without features, a smile that went against the laws of human form. I bolted. I ran out of the gas station into the rain, slipping and sliding, barely reaching my car. I threw myself inside, started the engine, and didn't stop until I reached my apartment complex 10 miles away. When I looked back in the rearview mirror, the street was empty. Nothing followed me, nothing chased me, nothing visible. Just the rain, falling silently, washing the roads clean. I told myself I was safe. I told myself it was over. But that night, I couldn't sleep. Every crack of thunder, every roll of rain against the windows made me jump. And then I heard it, just faint enough that I could barely be sure. A whisper, patient and soft, coming from outside my window. I'm still here. I never go out when it rains alone. I take extra precautions. I lock my doors. I avoid the woods and the roads where I first saw it. But I know it's still out there somewhere, waiting for the next storm, waiting for the rain to call it back into this world. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and hear it moving outside my apartment, just at the edge of the parking lot. And sometimes when the rain is heavy, I swear I can see it, a dark silhouette, leaning against a tree, just watching, just waiting. And I know, deep down, that if it wants me, it will come. There is no running, no hiding, only waiting. I've told a few people, and most laugh it off. Maybe they're right, maybe it's all stress and paranoia, but I know the truth. I know what I saw, and I know that the next time it rains, it will remember me. And I won't be able to hide. Story the end. The rain was coming down in sheets the night I left Lexington, Kentucky, heading back towards Cincinnati. I'd spent the day visiting a friend, stayed too late, and now I was trying to make the 2-hour drive home in the middle of a thunderstorm. The interstate had flooded in some spots, and traffic had been crawling. By midnight, though, the cars had thinned out until it was just me and the endless, dark ribbon of highway stretching through farmland and forests. I had the radio on low, but it was mostly static. Lightning forked across the sky every few seconds, lighting up barns, billboards, and the skeletal outlines of trees. The rain was so heavy my wipers were on their highest speed, but they could barely keep up. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. There's something about driving alone in the rain at night. It feels like the world has shrunk to the tiny cone of your headlights. Everything beyond that is just black, unknown. Around mile marker 53, I saw someone walking on the shoulder. At first, I thought it was just a stranded driver. A man in a dark hooded coat was trudging through the downpour, but there was no car, no hazard lights, nothing. He wasn't even holding out his thumb to hitchhike. He was just walking with his head down, water streaming off his coat. I slowed a little. The guy didn't look up. My gut told me not to stop, so I didn't. But when I glanced in the rearview mirror, He had stopped walking. He was standing perfectly still facing my taillights, his head tilted like he was staring right at me. My stomach dropped. I pressed the gas and kept going, watching until he disappeared into the curtain of rain. I tried to shake it off. People walk highways sometimes. Maybe his car broke down miles back. Maybe he was heading for the next exit. But a few miles later, as lightning cracked across the sky, I saw him again. Same dark hooded coat, same trudging gait, same bowed head. This time he was on the opposite side of the road. I gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles ached. "It's not him," I muttered. "It can't be." But it was. Even through the rain-smeared windshield I could tell. And when I passed, he didn't turn his head. Didn't even seem to breathe. For the next 30 miles I saw him 5 more times. Always ahead of me, always walking, sometimes on the right shoulder, sometimes on the left. I sped up, slowed down, tried to catch him in the act of appearing. But there was no way he could have gotten ahead of me unless he'd been running through the fields. And the fields were just black mud and barbed wire, nothing else. By the time I reached the next rest area, my nerves were shot. The rain was hammering down so hard it was like driving under a waterfall. I pulled off, parked by the vending machines, and sat there for a minute, trying to breathe. The parking lot was empty. The restroom stood under flickering fluorescent lights. I told myself I needed a break, maybe a soda. Just get out, stretch, calm down. I got out of the car and sprinted through the rain. Inside the restroom, the smell of damp concrete and disinfectant hit me. The light buzzed overhead. I splashed water on my face at the sink and looked up into the mirror. He was behind me. I froze. His hood was down now. His face was pale, like wet paper, eyes black as coal, skin rippling under the harsh light, as if it were water. He was standing right at the edge of the mirror's reflection, but when I spun around, the room was empty. I backed toward the door, heart pounding. The light flickered, and for a split second, his reflection was closer, his head tilted even farther, like a predator studying its prey. I bolted out the door into the downpour, my shoes slipping on the wet concrete. My car was sitting under the single light in the lot. Beyond it, just at the edge where the pavement turned to grass, the hooded man stood. This time he was looking at me directly. I didn't think. I just ran for my car, yanked the door open, and locked it. My hands shook as I jammed the key into the ignition. When the engine roared to life, the man took a step forward, and another. His steps made no sound on the wet pavement. I floored it. The car fishtailed, tires throwing up water, and I shot back onto the highway. The rain blurred everything into streaks. My heart was hammering so hard I could barely breathe. I checked the mirrors every few seconds, expecting to see him sitting in the back seat. Mile after mile passed, the road was deserted. The rain drummed on the roof like fingers. I tried to convince myself I was imagining it. Sleep deprivation. Too much caffeine. My mind playing tricks on me. Then the radio crackled. Not music, not static, just a faint voice whispering something I couldn't make out. I turned the volume down, but the whispering got louder. My skin crawled. It sounded like counting. 1, 2, 3, over and over in a low, wet voice. Lightning split the sky, and for a split second, the hooded man was standing in the middle of the road ahead of me. I swerved, tires shrieking, the car spinning halfway off the shoulder before I regained control. When my headlights hit the spot where he'd been standing, there was nothing there. The counting on the radio stopped. For the next hour, I drove like a maniac, heart in my throat, every muscle locked. When I finally saw the lights of Cincinnati on the horizon, I nearly sobbed. The rain let up as I reached the city. The radio went back to static. I pulled off at the first open gas station I saw, parked under the bright canopy, and sat there shaking. I went inside for coffee, trying to act normal. The cashier looked at me like I just crawled out of a grave. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. "Just a long drive," I said. "Storm's bad tonight," she said. "Highway's dangerous. People see things out there." I stared at her. "What do you mean?" She shrugged. "My uncle's a trucker. Says there's someone who walks that stretch on rainy nights. Been stories for years. Some say it's a man who died hitchhiking back in the 80s. Others say it's not a man at all." I didn't ask more. I didn't want to know. I left the gas station, got back into my car, and sat there for a long time. The rain had stopped, but the pavement still glistened under the lights. I checked the mirrors one last time before pulling out. Empty. But as I merged back onto the highway, just for a split second, I thought I saw a figure standing in the median, hood down, face pale, black eyes staring, waiting for the next car. I keep telling myself it was just my imagination, that I was tired, scared, seeing shadows in the rain. But deep down, I know better. On stormy nights, when the rain hits the windows and the thunder rolls in, I can still hear the counting on the radio. Story the end. The rain had been coming down in steady sheets since the late afternoon, the kind of cold, endless drizzle that soaks into your bones and makes everything feel heavier than it should. I was driving home from work on a narrow two-lane back road outside of a small town in Pennsylvania, a shortcut I had taken dozens of times before. My wipers struggled to keep up, swiping back and forth as the rain grew more insistent. The yellow lines on the pavement blurred, and the trees on either side of the road bent and shook in the wind like black shadows writhing in the storm. I hadn't meant to stay so late at work, but my boss had kept me over for a last-minute report, and by the time I finally clocked out, night was already pressing in. The storm had followed me all the way from the office, and now it seemed to be worsening with every passing mile. The air inside my car was clammy, the defroster blowing uselessly against the fog creeping up on the windshield. There were no other cars on the road. I hadn't seen a pair of headlights in almost 20 minutes, and the solitude began to feel oppressive. It was just me, the roar of the rain hammering the roof of my car, and the occasional flash of lightning that illuminated the trees. The silence in between thunderclaps seemed wrong somehow, too deep, as if the entire world was holding its breath. I slowed down around a curve, my tires hissing through the water that pooled on the asphalt when I spotted something on the shoulder ahead. At first, it looked like a fallen branch, but as my headlights cut across it, I realized it was a figure, a person. They were standing still, right at the edge of the road, half illuminated by the glow of my car. They wore a hooded jacket, the kind people throw on to keep dry, but theirs was so soaked through that the fabric clung to their frame. The hood was pulled low, hiding most of their face, but I could see their head tilt slightly as I approached, as if they were waiting for me. I slowed down instinctively, unsure if they needed help. There were no houses for miles in either direction, just trees, swampy ditches, and the occasional dirt driveway. Whoever they were, they shouldn't have been out there in the storm. As my car rolled past, the person turned their head to watch me. I caught the faint glint of their eyes beneath the hood, something cold and unblinking that made my stomach twist. I considered pulling over, but something in that look kept my foot pressing the gas instead. The rain made it hard to breathe for a moment, like the air had grown thick in my chest. I told myself they were just a stranded hiker, someone caught out in the weather. But the unease clung to me. A mile down the road, guilt gnawed at me enough that I considered turning around. I checked the rearview mirror, expecting to see nothing but the blur of rain on blacktop stretching into darkness. But my blood froze. The figure was there, standing directly in the middle of the road where I had passed them. My headlights only reached so far, but there was no mistaking it. Their hooded form was motionless, planted dead center of the lane. I blinked, wiped at the glass with my sleeve, convinced my mind was playing tricks on me, but when I looked again, they hadn't moved. A jolt of panic shot through me. How had they gotten there so fast? I'd been driving at least 40 miles per hour. There was no way. The road bent again, and I lost sight of them as trees swallowed the view. I drove faster, hands clenched on the wheel, refusing to look back again. My radio had cut out earlier in the storm, leaving only static when I tried to tune it, so there was no sound except the relentless slap of rain and my own uneven breathing. I told myself I was just tired, imagining things after a long day. But the longer I drove, the more the storm seemed to press against me, thick and suffocating, until I felt like I wasn't just driving through rain. I was being swallowed by it. And then, up ahead, the figure appeared again. This time they weren't on the shoulder or standing back in the trees. They were directly in the middle of the road, several hundred feet ahead, standing as still as a gravestone with their hood tilted down. My heart slammed against my ribs. I hit the brakes, tires skidding slightly on the slick asphalt as the car slowed. My headlights painted them in stark light, and for the first time I noticed details I hadn't before. before. Their jacket was torn at the sleeves, shredded in places like it had been dragged across asphalt. Their jeans looked stiff, darker than the rain should have made them, and the puddle beneath their feet glistened darker than water. I honked once, the sound loud and jarring in the storm. They didn't move, not even a flinch. I leaned forward, squinting through the windshield. The rain blurred everything, but I could swear their face was pale beneath the hood, the kind of pallor that reminded me of wax or stone. I didn't get out. I couldn't. Something primal in me screamed that stepping outside would be a mistake. I shifted into reverse, planning to back up and take a longer detour through town. But when I glanced into the rearview mirror, my throat closed. There was another figure standing behind my car. No sound, no warning, just there. They looked the same soaked hood, same stillness, only feet away from my bumper. I don't remember deciding. My body moved on instinct. I slammed the gear into drive and swerved hard to the left, tires splashing through the shoulder. I passed within feet of the figure in the road, bracing for impact, but there was nothing. No thud, no crunch, just empty rain and the hollow sound of my engine. When I looked back, the road was empty. Both figures were gone. My chest heaved as I sped down the twisting back road, each curve threatening to send me into a ditch. Lightning split the sky, casting the trees into sharp, skeletal shapes. My hands ached from how tightly I gripped the wheel. I didn't see them again that night, but the rain followed me all the way home, pounding on the roof of my house as if to remind me it hadn't forgotten. That should have been the end of it, but over the following weeks, the storm seemed to linger in ways I couldn't explain. Even when the weather was clear, I'd hear the faint patter of rain against the windows late at night. Sometimes, driving home, I'd catch glimpses in the rearview mirror, shapes too still to be shadows, standing just beyond the reach of the taillights. The worst was the night I woke to find wet footprints leading from my front door to the bedroom. Bare prints soaked into the carpet, stopping just short of the bed where I lay frozen, listening to the faint drip of water on the floor. When I turned on the light, they were gone. I started to avoid driving at night. I left work early whenever I could, and I stuck to the main highways no matter how much longer it took. But sometimes, even surrounded by other cars, I'd see someone standing on the shoulder of the interstate in the rain. Hood pulled low, face too pale, watching. People tell me it's stress, or exhaustion, or that I just scared myself that night and can't shake it. But I know what I saw. I know what followed me. And every time the rain starts to fall, I catch myself glancing toward the road, waiting for them to be there again, waiting for the night they finally decide not to disappear. Story the end. The rain that night didn't fall in a gentle drizzle. It came down heavy, thick, and relentless, slapping the asphalt with a weight that made every passing car hiss like some angry beast. The sky was ink black, the kind of darkness where even the streetlights seemed swallowed whole, their halos of yellow bending and fading into mist before they reached the ground. I was driving home from a long shift, bone-tired, the rhythmic thumping of my windshield wipers, the only steady sound cutting through the chaos of the storm. I've never liked driving in heavy rain. The way the road reflects light back into your eyes, the blurry mirages of red brake lights, the constant tension in your arms as you fight the wheel, it's exhausting. But that night, something else made it worse. Maybe it was the late hour, maybe it was the way the water pooled along the shoulders of the road, but I felt watched. Like out there, beyond the sheet of rain, someone's eyes were locked on me, waiting for me to make a mistake. I took the back roads home, as usual, quieter, darker, less traffic. But about halfway through, I passed an old gas station that had been abandoned for years. Its broken sign swayed violently in the wind, chains clanking against the rusted frame. As I approached, my headlights swept across the pumps, and that's when I saw it. A figure. It was hard to make out through the storm, but someone was standing by the farthest pump, motionless, soaked from head to toe. At first I thought maybe it was a stranded driver, someone whose car had broken down, but no car was nearby, no bike, nothing. Just them. They didn't wave for help, didn't move at all, just stood there, like they were waiting for me. I slowed down, debating whether I should stop, but the hair on the back of my neck rose in a way I couldn't ignore. Something about the stillness in the middle of all that chaos felt wrong. So I pressed the gas and kept moving, stealing one last glance in my rearview mirror. That was when my stomach dropped. The figure had shifted. Its head was turned toward me now, following my car as I drove away, its pale face faintly catching the glow of my taillights. I didn't see another vehicle for miles after that, and the rain only got worse. My thoughts ran wild. What if someone had really needed help? What if they'd been stuck out there? But no part of me believed it. Deep down, I knew that whatever was standing there wasn't looking for a ride. It was looking for me. By the time I reached my neighborhood, I felt like I'd been driving for hours. I parked under the oak tree near my house, shoulders stiff, mind buzzing. The rain beat down so hard I had to sit for a moment before running to my front porch. That was when I saw it again. Across the street, just beyond the reach of the nearest street lamp, a figure stood still in the rain. The same posture, the same pale face. I bolted for my door, fumbling with my keys, heart slamming in my chest. Inside, I locked everything. Front door, back door, every window latch. My clothes dripped onto the carpet as I listened for sounds beyond the storm. For a while, all I could hear was the rain hammering my roof, the gutters overflowing. Then, faintly, I heard footsteps on the porch. Slow, deliberate, heavy despite the downpour. I didn't look out the window. Something in me screamed not to. Instead, I sat on the floor with my back against the door, straining to hear. The footsteps stopped, and the silence that followed was worse than any sound. Then came a knock. 3 dull thuds spaced far apart, like whoever or whatever stood outside wanted to savor the moment. I stayed there, frozen, clutching the phone in my hand, though I couldn't bring myself to dial. Eventually, after what felt like hours, the knocking stopped. But the rain didn't ease, and I knew I wasn't alone. I don't remember falling asleep, but I must have. The next morning, the rain was gone, the sun breaking through thin clouds. My porch was soaked, puddles collected by the steps. But when I opened the door, my blood ran cold. In the center of the porch was a perfect, dry outline of 2 feet, side by side, facing the door. The wood inside those outlines wasn't wet. It was bone dry, like nothing had touched it, not even the rain. That was just one night. I wish I could say it was the last, but it wasn't. Over the next week, the storms kept coming, unusual for that time of year. Each night the rain fell hard, and each night I felt it watching me. Sometimes I'd glimpse it through the curtains, standing by the street in my yard or once at the edge of the trees behind my house. It never knocked again, but I'd hear faint tapping on my windows, a slow drag of fingers across the glass. One night, after convincing myself I had to prove it was in my head, I left the blinds open just a little. I sat in the dark, watching the sheets of rain under the streetlight. Hours passed. My eyelids grew heavy, and then, just as I was about to drift off, I saw it. A pale face pressed against the glass, upside down like it was hanging there above the window, staring in. I screamed, grabbed the lamp, and when I turned the light on, it was gone. Neighbors began noticing strange things, too. A woman down the street swore she heard someone calling her name outside in the rain, but when she looked, no one was there. Another neighbor's dog wouldn't stop barking at the storm, hackles raised until it collapsed from exhaustion. One evening, I decided to leave town for a few days, just to get some space, clear my head. I packed a bag, loaded my car, and pulled out of the driveway. But as I drove past that same old gas station on my way out, my headlights caught the pumps again. And there it was, the figure. Waiting, watching, like it had been expecting me. I don't know why I didn't keep driving. Maybe part of me wanted answers. Maybe part of me thought if I confronted it, it would end. I pulled over, rain pounding the roof of my car, and rolled the window down just a crack. Cold air rushed in, thick with the smell of wet asphalt. "Who are you?" I shouted into the storm. My voice cracked. The figure didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, rainwater streaming down its face, eyes locked on me. The silence stretched until the sound of rain filled every corner of my mind. Then, slowly, it raised one hand and pointed at me. Not at the car, not at the road. At me. That was enough. I floored it out of there, tires spitting water, heart hammering so hard I thought it would burst. I didn't look back, not even once. It's been years since that night, but I still think about it every time it rains. Sometimes I'll wake in the middle of the night to hear the storm battering the windows, and I'll swear I can hear faint knocking beneath it. Once I found footprints on my porch again. Dry, perfect outlines, side by side. I don't tell many people about it. Those who do hear usually laugh it off, say it was exhaustion, a trick of the rain, maybe even a dream. But I know what I saw, and if you're ever driving alone on a stormy night, passing an abandoned gas station on a back road, keep your eyes forward. Don't slow down. Don't stop. Because if you see someone standing there waiting in the rain, know this: they're not waiting for help. They're waiting for you. And once they've seen you, the rain will never sound the same again. Story the end. It was late September, and the rain had been falling steadily for hours, a relentless curtain that blurred the edges of everything outside. I was driving back from a friend's house along a rural stretch of road in southern Ohio. Two-lane highways, empty fields, and nothing but dark woods pressing in on either side. My wipers worked furiously but couldn't keep up with the downpour. It was the kind of night where every tree looked like a person and every shadow felt alive. I had about an hour left to go before reaching my apartment. The road curved sharply, and my headlights lit up a figure standing at the edge of the asphalt. I nearly slammed on the brakes, my heart leaping into my throat. It was a woman, barefoot, her soaked white dress clinging to her skin. She didn't move as my car approached, just stood there like she'd been waiting for me. Her hair was long, dark, and dripping, plastered to her face so I couldn't see her expression. I slowed the car, unsure what to do. The area was remote, no houses or businesses for miles. She could have been hurt, lost, or in danger. My instincts screamed at me to keep driving, but another part of me, the part that didn't want to leave someone stranded, forced me to pull over. I rolled down the window slightly, rain pelting my arm. "Are you okay?" I called out. My voice sounded strange against the roar of the rain. She didn't answer. She just slowly turned her head toward me. Her eyes were shadowed, but I swear they looked impossibly dark, like deep wells. My skin prickled. "You need help?" I tried again, my voice weaker this time. She took one slow step toward the car. Something in my gut twisted violently, warning me that something was wrong. I reached to roll the window up, but before I could, she spoke. Her voice was low, but clear over the rain. "You shouldn't stop here." The words were so soft they barely rose above the storm, but they hit me hard, like a weight settling on my chest. My heart raced. "Okay," I said, trying to sound calm. "I'll call someone for you, okay?" Her lips curled into the faintest hint of a smile, and she tilted her head. "No one can help you now." I slammed the window shut and floored the accelerator. The car lurched forward, tires spinning on the wet asphalt before catching traction. My hands were white-knuckled on the wheel as I sped off into the rain. My rearview mirror showed nothing but darkness behind me. I kept glancing back anyway, sure I'd see her walking in the middle of the road. A few miles later, I forced myself to slow down. My heart was still pounding. I told myself I'd misheard her, that stress and bad weather had made me imagine things. But when I looked over at my passenger seat, there was a wet handprint smeared across the upholstery, a handprint that hadn't been there before. I swore under my breath, gripping the wheel tighter. The storm was so heavy that the road ahead looked like a silver river. My headlights flickered once, then steadied. The radio hissed with static, then cut out completely. That was when I heard it. A whisper, faint but unmistakable. "You shouldn't stop here." It was her voice, right next to me, like she was in the car. I whipped my head around, but the passenger seat was empty. My pulse hammered so hard I could barely see straight. I drove as fast as I could without spinning out, desperate to get home. The rain made everything a blur. Twice I thought I saw her standing at the edge of the road again, but each time it was just a mailbox or a tree. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. When I finally reached my apartment complex, the parking lot was deserted. I sprinted inside, soaked to the skin, and locked the door behind me. My apartment was quiet, but my nerves were buzzing like live wires. I tried to calm myself, tried to convince myself it had been a trick of the weather. Then I saw the wet footprints. They started at the front door and led across the carpet toward the kitchen. Bare, human footprints, the same size as a woman's. My heart leapt into my throat. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a heavy flashlight, and followed the prints. They led to the kitchen window, where the rain streaked the glass. The window was locked. No one was there. I turned around, and that's when I saw her. She was standing in the hallway just outside my bedroom, hair dripping, white dress clinging to her body, eyes as black as night. She didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at me. I couldn't breathe. "What do you want?" I whispered, my voice cracking. She tilted her head slightly. "You shouldn't stop here," she said again, and this time her voice sounded like 100 whispers layered over each other. I dropped the flashlight and stumbled backward, my heart slamming against my ribs. I blinked, and she was gone. The hallway was empty. The footprints on the carpet had vanished. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the building, every drip of rain against the window made me jump. I left the lights on until morning. Over the next few weeks, it kept happening. Every time it rained, I'd see her somewhere. Sometimes at the edge of the parking lot, sometimes reflected in shop windows when I was alone. Once I saw her standing across the street from my work, staring up at the second-floor window where I was watching her. She never moved, never blinked, never spoke again. People started noticing my behavior, how jumpy I was, how little I slept, how pale I'd become. I tried to explain but stopped when I saw the looks they gave me. They thought I was losing my mind. Maybe I was. But every time it rained, I knew she'd be there. The last time I saw her was a month ago. Another storm, another late-night drive. I was coming home from work, and the rain was hammering the roof of my car so hard I could barely hear myself think. I rounded a bend and saw her standing in the middle of the road, barefoot, hair dripping, eyes black. I swerved to avoid her and spun out, crashing into a ditch. The airbags deployed, the car filled with the smell of burnt chemicals. I was dazed, bleeding from my forehead. Through the cracked windshield, I saw her standing right in front of the car, inches from the hood. She bent down slightly, her face close to the glass, and whispered, "You shouldn't stop here." Then she vanished into the rain. I don't know how I made it home that night. The car was totaled, but somehow I walked away. Ever since, I haven't driven in the rain. I don't go out at night. But still, sometimes when the storm hits and the world goes gray and silver, I see her standing outside my window, waiting. I don't know who she is or what she wants, but I know this. If you're ever driving in the rain on an empty road and you see a woman standing barefoot at the edge of the asphalt, don't stop. Because once you see her, she never leaves you. Story the end. The rain had started in the late afternoon, a soft drizzle that turned into a downpour by nightfall. By the time I left work, the streets of the small West Virginia town where I lived had turned into black rivers, reflecting the dim orange glow of streetlights. I had worked a double shift at the nursing home, and my bones ached with exhaustion. My car's wipers beat a frantic rhythm as I steered onto the narrow 2-lane highway leading back to my apartment 30 miles away. The radio was nothing but static, my phone battery hovering at 2%. All I wanted was my bed, the hum of my heater, and silence. The rain came down harder, almost blinding. I slowed to a crawl, squinting through the windshield. The highway wound through the Monongahela National Forest, miles of dense woods on either side. No towns, no gas stations, no signs of life except for the occasional deer darting across the road. I'd driven it hundreds of times, but that night it felt like something out of a dream. Dark, endless, and strangely foreign. I reached a stretch of road where the trees leaned over so far they nearly formed a tunnel. My headlights illuminated sheets of rain cascading like a curtain. That's when I saw it. Dim red taillights flickering ahead of me. Relief flooded me at first. At least someone else was on the road. I pressed the gas, closing the distance, but no matter how far I drove, the car ahead stayed the same distance, the taillights faint but constant. I honked once, twice. No response. It didn't speed up or slow down. It was like chasing a ghost. Then, without warning, the taillights vanished. One moment they were there, the next the road ahead was empty. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and checked my mirrors. Nothing but darkness and rain. My heart started to pound. I slowed, glancing at my dying phone. I had no signal. Just me, the storm, and the road. A mile later, I saw something on the shoulder. Someone, a figure, standing perfectly still in the rain, wearing what looked like a long coat. Their head was lowered, arms at their sides. I slowed, thinking maybe they needed help. But as my headlights swept over them, something about the figure was wrong. Their skin, or what I could see of it, looked pale, almost gray, and they weren't soaked like they should have been in that kind of storm. They just stood there, motionless as the rain pounded down. I sped up, heart hammering. My eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, and my stomach lurched. The figure was in the road now, directly behind my car, standing in the center of the lane, head still bowed. I hadn't heard footsteps. I hadn't seen them move. It was impossible. My hands shook on the wheel. I told myself I was overtired imagining things. I turned the radio dial just to hear something, anything, but all that came through was a low hiss of static that rose and fell like whispering. My phone died completely, the screen black. That was when the road started to look unfamiliar. I should have hit the turnoff to my town by now, but instead the highway kept twisting deeper into the woods, each mile marker the same number, 19, over and over again. Then I saw the figure again, this time standing in the middle of the road ahead of me. I slammed on the brakes, the tires skidding on the slick pavement. My headlights caught their face, or what should have been a face, but it wasn't right. It was blurred somehow, like a wet painting, features smudged into nothing. The figure tilted its head slowly to one side. My stomach turned over. Without thinking, I swerved around it and floored the gas pedal. The road bent sharply, and suddenly I wasn't on the highway anymore. I was on an old, cracked side road lined with sagging telephone poles. I had no memory of turning. The rain was louder now, hammering the roof so hard it drowned out everything else. My breath came fast and shallow. I could feel it, something, watching me from the trees on either side. Every time the lightning flashed, I caught glimpses, shapes moving just beyond the tree line, keeping pace with my car. I pressed harder on the gas. The road narrowed, hemmed in by woods that seemed to close in like a tunnel. Up ahead, a small bridge loomed over a swollen creek, its metal rails rusted. As I crossed, something slammed against the side of the car with a force that rocked it on its wheels. I screamed, swerving to stay on the bridge. Another blow hit the roof, a heavy thud like a fist. I didn't look. I didn't dare. I just drove, tires squealing, my hands gripping the wheel so hard they ached. When I finally reached the end of the bridge, the car lurched forward like it had broken free of something. In the rearview mirror, under the dim glow of my taillights, I saw the figure standing at the center of the bridge, its smudged face turned toward me, arms outstretched. Then it faded into the rain, gone like mist. The road straightened out again, the woods thinning, and at last I saw a gas station ahead, its lights flickering like a beacon. I pulled in so fast my tires screeched, nearly hitting the pump. My whole body was shaking. Inside, the clerk looked up, startled, as I stumbled in soaking wet. I asked where I was, my voice hoarse. He told me I was 20 miles in the opposite direction from where I should have been, on a road that had been closed for years after a rock slide. I left my car there overnight, too scared to drive it back. When I returned with a friend the next morning, the rain had stopped. The road was dry. But on the hood of my car, clear as day, were long, pale handprints pressed into the metal, fingers splayed like something had tried to hold on. Even now, years later, storms make my chest tighten. Every time rain drums against my window at night, I half expect to see that figure standing at the edge of the street, head bowed, waiting for me to drive again. I never take that highway anymore. I never drive alone in the rain if I can help it. But deep down, I know, if I ever end up on a lonely road in a storm again, it'll be there, waiting. Story the end. The rain had begun falling just after sunset, a slow, heavy drizzle that seemed to soak the whole town in a curtain of gray. I'd been working the closing shift at a small diner off Highway 16, a lonely stretch of road in northern Pennsylvania that seemed to vanish into the forest at night. By the time I locked up and stepped outside, the lot was empty except for my old Chevy sitting under the lone street lamp, its dull blue paint reflecting the water pooling on the cracked asphalt. The diner itself sat miles from the nearest house, and at night the surrounding woods pressed in like dark walls. It was the kind of place that always felt a little off after dark, like it was hiding something. I'd brushed that off for years, telling myself it was just the isolation playing tricks on me. But that night, with the rain and the wind and the smell of wet pine, the air carried a strange heaviness. I climbed into my car, shivering as the cold dampness crept under my jacket. The windshield fogged instantly, blurring the world outside. I turned on the heater and waited for it to clear before pulling onto the slick two-lane highway. My plan was simple, drive the 40 minutes back to town, get home, and forget the long shift. But from the moment I left the diner, I had the unsettling feeling that I wasn't alone out there. The first few miles were nothing but darkness and rain. My wipers thumped rhythmically, clearing streaks of water as headlights from passing cars occasionally flashed by. But soon the traffic thinned. The road stretched empty ahead of me, the forest hugging it tightly on both sides. The rain intensified, pelting the roof in a relentless drumbeat. That was when I noticed it. At first, I thought it was a branch or debris from the storm lying on the shoulder of the road, but as I got closer, I saw it wasn't lying down at all. It was standing. A figure. Tall, motionless, silhouetted by the faint glow of a distant streetlight. I instinctively slowed, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The rain distorted everything, but I could make out a person-shaped outline. When my headlights swept across it, the figure didn't move. It was tall, taller than any person I'd ever seen, its arms long and limp at its sides. Its head was bent slightly forward, like it was watching the road. My stomach dropped. My instinct was to drive past, but the road was narrow, the shoulder tight. As I eased past, I didn't dare look directly at it. Out of the corner of my eye, I thought I saw its head turn slowly to follow me. I pressed the accelerator, trying to push the moment from my mind. The rain grew heavier, the road darker, and the woods more oppressive. A mile later, my curiosity got the better of me. I checked the rearview mirror. The figure was gone. I drove another 10 minutes before the unease returned. This time it was subtler, a feeling like being watched. I glanced into the mirror again and froze. There, illuminated by the faint red glow of my taillights, was the same figure, standing directly in the center of the road I'd just driven down, perfectly still. I blinked hard, telling myself it was an illusion, a trick of the rain and the darkness. But as the road curved, I caught glimpses of it in the mirror again and again, closer each time, though I hadn't slowed. My hands gripped the wheel so tight they hurt. I thought about pulling over, but every instinct screamed no. The figure didn't seem to be walking or running. It was just there. One moment 50 yards back, the next 20. Its presence made the air in my car feel colder. Desperate, I took the next turnoff onto a smaller road that wound deeper into the forest. The trees pressed closer here, their branches heavy with rain, casting twisting shadows across the asphalt. I drove fast, tires hissing over the wet pavement, hoping to lose whatever this was. When I checked the mirror again, my stomach turned to ice. It was standing at the edge of the road now, just behind me, its long arms hanging at impossible angles. Its head tilted in a slow, deliberate way like a predator tracking prey. I drove faster, the rain blurring everything into streaks of black and gray. My radio crackled to life suddenly, static filling the car even though I hadn't turned it on. Through the static came a faint whisper, so low I couldn't make out the words. My hands trembled as I reached to turn the dial, but the noise only grew louder, like dozens of voices overlapping. I slammed the radio off and focused on the road. The whispering stopped instantly, leaving only the roar of the rain. Finally, through the sheets of water, I saw a small gas station ahead. Its neon sign flickered weakly, casting a sickly green glow over the pumps. I pulled in hard, tires skidding on the wet concrete. The station was empty. No attendant, no cars, just the hum of the lights and the smell of wet pavement. I parked under the awning and looked around. The woods loomed on all sides, dark and impenetrable. I grabbed my phone, no signal. I stared out into the rain, searching for any movement. And then I saw it, reflected in the wet glass of the station's window, behind me. The figure, closer than it had ever been. Its body was impossibly thin, its head too long, its arms dragging slightly as if they were heavy. The reflection didn't move even as I spun around to look. There was nothing there, just rain and darkness. When I turned back to the glass, the reflection was gone. I locked my doors and sat frozen, heart hammering so hard it hurt. Minutes passed like hours. I thought about honking the horn, making noise, anything to scare it off. But something told me sound wouldn't matter. Finally, when I felt brave enough, I started the engine and drove off, praying the figure wouldn't follow. The rain had lessened slightly, but the forest seemed darker, the road narrower. I kept checking the mirror, my breath fogging the glass. I didn't see it again until I reached the old iron bridge a few miles from town. There in the middle of the bridge, it stood waiting. Its body was hunched now, its head cocked unnaturally to the side. I hit the brakes hard, my tires screeching on the wet metal. For a moment, we stared at each other through the windshield, though I couldn't see its face, just a dark, empty void where features should have been. My whole body screamed to turn around, but the road behind me felt worse. I floored the accelerator and swerved, narrowly missing it as I shot past. When I looked back, it wasn't there. The bridge was empty. By the time I reached my apartment, the rain had stopped. The streets were slick, glistening under the streetlights. I sat in my driveway for a long time, watching the mirrors, expecting to see it standing there. But there was nothing. I rushed inside, locking every door and window, drawing the curtains tight. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the building, every gust of wind sounded like footsteps. The next morning, I convinced myself it had been exhaustion, shadows, and storm playing tricks on me. But later that week, a coworker at the diner told me she'd seen something on the highway during the storm. A tall, thin, man-shaped figure walking down the center of the road, arms dragging, head tilted. She said it looked like it was following a car. I didn't tell her what I'd seen. I didn't tell anyone. But now, every time it rains, I feel it again. That sense of being watched, of something just outside the edge of the headlights, waiting. Story the end.